My family erased me from their lives, then brought a gift to my door. Tests revealed poison and the trial sent them all to prison. If you had told me years ago that the people who shared my last name would one day stand in front of a judge accused of trying to poison the only woman I have ever truly loved, I would have laughed at you, even when it was painful. But pain has a way of reshaping you. It doesn't come all at once, not in a single blow. It drips into your life slowly, moment by moment, until the day you wake up and realize you are drowning in it. I didn't notice it first. I kept trying, kept hoping, kept begging for a place that was never really mine. And when the truth finally sank in, when I understood I would never be enough for them, I made myself a promise. I swore that I would stop chasing doors that were never meant to open for me. I promised that if I ever built a life of my own, it would be with people who wanted me there, not people who treated me like a shadow. That promise has guided every step since, and it is the reason I am still standing here today. What happened after that? The exclusions, the betrayals, the long silence that grew louder with every passing year is the story I'm about to tell you. And it all began much earlier than I realized, back when I was just a kid sitting at the dinner table, wondering why laughter and love seemed to skip right over me. Growing up, I never understood why I felt like a guest in my own home. My siblings, Marcus and Lily, were the golden ones. Marcus was the star athlete, tall and confident, the kind of boy who drew applause just by stepping onto a basketball court. Lily was the darling of every room, captain of the cheer squad, adored by teachers, envied by classmates, wearing their children's success like badges of honor. And then there was Daniel, the quiet one. I spent afternoons sketching battle scenes from history books, memorizing constellations, and collecting facts about wars and explorers that nobody at the dinner table cared to hear. When I tried to share, my father sighed and went back to his newspaper. Marcus would make a joke. Lily would roll her eyes, and the conversation would move on. Without me, it started small. Forgotten invitations to sleepovers hosted by family friends. My name missing from the list when teams were picked for games in the backyard. My parents always had explanations. We didn't think you'd enjoy it. You're not really the social type. What they called consideration was really exclusion, dressed up as kindness. I learned early to carry the sting in silence. One memory has never left me. I must have been 10. It was Lily's birthday party, balloons everywhere, music blasting through the walls. I was told there wasn't enough space for me at the table, so I ate my slice of cake in the kitchen alone. Through the doorway, I watched them sing and laugh, the sound of their voices blurring into something sharp and painful. That night, I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, wondering if being invisible was my role in this family. By the time I was a teenager, I had grown used to being the afterthought. Marcus brought home trophies. Lily collected crowns from school dances, and I became the one they mentioned as a side note. Oh, Daniel, he's fine. He likes his books. At school, teachers praised my essays, but at home, those words meant nothing. I didn't know it then, but every moment of exclusion was pushing me toward a breaking point, one that would arrive years later in the most brutal way imaginable. Because the truth is, the real fracture didn't happen when I was a child sitting alone with cold cake. It came when the people who were supposed to love me most made their choice loud and clear on the days that should have been about family above all else, their weddings. The first wedding should have been a moment of celebration, a chance to stand beside my sister on one of the biggest days of her life. Instead, it became a memory carved into me like a scar. Lily called me to her room a month before the ceremony. She was all smiles, the kind of sugary expression that felt rehearsed. I sat down expecting to talk about what role I would play, maybe as an usher or even just a supportive brother in the crowd. But she closed the door, sat across from me, and said, "Daniel, I just think it's better if you don't come." At first, I thought she was joking. I even laughed, but her eyes didn't soften. She leaned forward, still smiling, and told me it was going to be a very normal wedding and not really my scene. She hugged me as if she was protecting me from something, promised to send pictures, and acted like she had done me a favor. I remember walking out of that room numb. I didn't shout, I didn't beg. I just carried the weight of rejection like a stone in my chest. My parents defended her. My father muttered from behind his newspaper, "She's the bride. It's her choice." My mother added, "Besides, you'd hate being surrounded by all those people. That was their comfort, convincing me I didn't belong. Even at my sister's wedding, 2 years later came Marcus's wedding, and this time they didn't even bother to pretend. There was no conversation, no warning. One evening, I opened Facebook, and there it was, blurry photo of my family, dressed in their finest, laughing together around a banquet table. The caption read, "Family is everything." I stared at that picture until my eyes burned. Not a single call, not a text, not even the courtesy of letting me know the day existed. They had erased me completely and done it publicly. It was message loud enough for the whole world. I was not part of the club that night. I sat in the dark of my apartment, scrolling through more photos, each one a new knife. My parents dancing, my relatives toasting, my siblings basking in joy, while I was left in silence. For the first time, I wondered if the word family had ever included me at all. You'd think those moments would have been enough to end it, enough for me to cut ties and never look back. And because of that, I kept trying. I kept showing up for holidays, kept answering texts, kept knocking on doors that had already been locked, until one night. Years later, when I made the mistake of walking into my brother's new housewarming party a night that turned into the... But part of me still clung to that stubborn hope, the belief that maybe, just maybe, they'd want me there. Marcus had just bought his first house. A chance to prove I still belonged. I drove an hour with a gift card tucked into an envelope and a practiced smile on my face. I rang the doorbell 3 times before Marcus finally opened the door. The look on his face wasn't joy or surprise, it was confusion, as though I had wandered into the wrong house. Hey, he said, scratching the back of his neck, I thought. Mom said you probably wouldn't come. I forced a grin, held up the envelope. I'm here, brought something. He took it like it might explode in his hands. Inside the house was bursting with life, laughter spilling out of every room, music thundering from the speakers, the smell of barbecue floating through the air. Faces I'd grown up with were there, cousins, neighbors, even old family friends. People who had once watched me play in the yard now barely glanced my way. Some nodded politely before turning back to their real conversations. My words evaporated before they reached anyone, and then came the moment that sealed it. Near the end of the night, Lily, already tipsy, raised her voice. Across the yard, her words cut through the music like a blade. Must be a new record. The crowd around her erupted in laughter, real full-bodied laughter. My plastic cup cracked in my hand, soda spilling onto my shoes. I stood frozen, my face burning, while their voices carried on as if mocking me was the entertainment of the night. No one defended me. No one looked ashamed. In that moment, I wasn't a brother, a son, or even a guest. I was the punchline. I didn't make a scene. I didn't shout or slam doors. I slipped out through the side gate, walked quietly to my car, and drove away under the hum of streetlights. In the silence of that drive home, I knew something had broken clean through. I deleted the family group chat that night, erased the texts, because walking away from them opened the door to the one person who would show me what Lavande real family was supposed to feel like. After that night at Marcus's house, my world felt quieter than ever. Not peaceful quiet in the way an abandoned house is quiet. Her name was Alina. We met on a gray Saturday morning at a local bookstore. I was flipping through a biography of an old explorer when she leaned over from the next aisle, pointed at the cover, and said, "That guy's life ended in disaster. You know that, right?" Her voice carried a hint of mischief, her eyes bright with curiosity. I should have brushed her off. Instead, I laughed for the first time in what felt like years. One conversation turned into coffee. Coffee turned into long walks, movie nights, and evenings where I told her pieces of myself I had never shared with anyone. She didn't flinch at my awkward facts about history or my tendency to overthink. She leaned in. She wanted to know more. With Alina, I wasn't invisible. I wasn't a burden or an afterthought. I was seen. She celebrated the very things my family mocked. If I stayed up late sketching, she wanted to see the drawings. If I rambled about constellations, she lay beside me on the grass, searching the sky until she found them too. Months passed, and the emptiness my family left behind began to fill with something real. Her laughter replaced the cruel jokes that used to echo in my head. Her kindness drowned out years of cold indifference. For the first time, I believed I could build a future without carrying the weight of their rejection. When I asked her to marry me, I expected hesitation, some uncertainty. Maybe questions about my complicated past. Instead, Elena's eyes filled with tears, and she whispered, "Yes," before I even finished the question. Planning the wedding felt like reclaiming a life I was never allowed to have. We sat at the kitchen table, names spread across paper, choosing who would stand with us on that day. Friends who had lifted me through hard times, neighbors who treated me like family, people who had earned their place in our story. And then Elena asked softly, "What about your family?" For a moment, the question hung heavy in the air. I thought of Lily telling me I wasn't welcome, of Marcus posting pictures with captions about family while I sat alone, of laughter at my expense echoing across a yard while I stood frozen. I let those memories wash over me, sharp as glass, and then I shook my head. "No," I said quietly, my voice steady, "not them. This day is about love, not obligation." Elena reached across the table, squeezed my hand, and smiled. "Good, because I want our wedding filled with people who actually want to see us happy." For the first time in my life, I felt like I had chosen my own family, and I thought the hardest part was behind me. But when the invitations went out and word spread through town, the silence I had chosen was shattered by an explosion I never saw coming. The invitations went out quietly, sealed in cream envelopes with gold lettering. Friends smiled when they opened theirs, neighbors hugged us in the grocery store, and my coworkers clapped me on the back, promising to dance too much at the reception. For a moment, it felt perfect, simple, joyful, untouched by the past. But small towns don't keep secrets for long. A week later, my phone buzzed with a message from my mother. Just 6 words. "Heard you're getting married. When's our invite?" No congratulations. No warmth, just expectation. As if years of silence, insults, and humiliation meant nothing. As if being family was a free pass, I stared at the message for a long time before typing back a reply. There's no invitation. What came next was chaos. My phone lit up with messages from every direction: Mom calling me ungrateful, Dad demanding respect, Marcus accusing me of betrayal, Lily spewing venom about how blood can't be erased. Guilt trips arrived in waves. "After everything we've done for you, you'll regret cutting us out. We're still your real family." Then the Facebook posts started. Lily wrote, "Funny how some people forget where they came from. Enjoy your little party without real family." The comments poured in, some siding with her, others calling her out. One person asked bluntly, "Didn't you leave your brother out of your wedding?" No reply, just defensive likes and silence. Marcus posted a picture of himself with our parents, captioned, "Family above all." A neighbor commented, "Then why isn't your brother in any of your family photos?" Again, silence. But the one that stung the most came from my mother. A grainy picture of an old family gathering, all of them smiling, me cropped out at the edge. The caption read, "Some people forget who loved them first." Loved me? I almost laughed. When had they ever shown love? Through it all, I didn't respond, not one word. Every angry voicemail, every text, every postie, let them rot unanswered. Instead, I poured myself into planning the day Elena and I had dreamed of: the guest list filled with people who truly cared, the venue decorated with lights and flowers that didn't just symbolize a wedding, but a rebirth. Yet beneath the laughter of our friends and the clinking of champagne glasses, I could feel the storm brewing outside. Because if there was one thing my family couldn't stand, it was being ignored. And on the day of the wedding, their absence wasn't the end of the drama, it was only the beginning. The morning of our wedding felt unreal, like I had slipped into a life that didn't belong to me. The vineyard sat on the edge of town, rows of green stretching into the horizon, the kind of place I had only seen in magazines. The sky was clear, the air warm, and for once, nothing felt heavy. I stood at the altar, hands trembling, until I saw Elena walking toward me. The sunlight caught in her hair, her smile brighter than anything I had ever known. In that moment, every insult, every rejection, every lonely night faded into silence. For the first time, I didn't feel like an outsider. I felt chosen. The ceremony was simple. Friends cheered, neighbors cried, and when we exchanged vows, I could hear the strength in my own voice. We weren't just promising love, We were promising a life built on choice, not obligation. As we walked back down the aisle, surrounded by people clapping and throwing flower petals, I realized something profound. I had finally built a family. But the sweetness of that day didn't stop the noise outside. During the reception, while the music played and glasses clinked, an old neighbor pulled me aside with a grin. "Daniel, you should see this," he said, holding out his phone. On the screen, Facebook was lighting up in real time. My siblings and parents had turned our wedding into their stage for a meltdown. Lily wrote long, angry posts about betrayal, about how I was selfish for excluding the people who had raised me. One commenter cut straight through. "Didn't you leave him out of your wedding?" Her thread went silent after that. Marcus tried to play the martyr. His post read, "Guess some people forget who was there for them growing up." The first reply underneath was brutal. "You didn't even invite him to your own wedding." Karma. And my mother, hers, was the worst. A photo from years ago, the whole family smiling at a barbecue. The caption, "Some people forget who loved them first." Looking at it, I felt nothing but disbelief. When had she ever loved me? Really? When had she chosen me for anything? My friends expected me to rage, to break down, to feel that old familiar sting. Instead, I laughed. Not cruelly, not bitterly, just freely. Because while they were busy shouting into the void of social media, I was here, dancing under string lights with the woman who had given me everything they never could. That night, the vineyard glowed with warmth. The cake was lopsided, the playlist skipped, someone spilled wine across the dance floor, and none of it mattered. We sang, we laughed, and for once, the word family didn't hurt. It felt whole. I thought that was the end, that my silence would finally teach them I was no longer theirs to control. But people like my family don't accept silence. They see it as a challenge. And just weeks later, when I thought peace had finally settled into my life, they arrived. Uninvited, carrying a casserole dish and a smile that hid something far darker. It was a Wednesday morning, the kind of quiet day where nothing is supposed to happen. I was working from home, tapping away at my laptop, while Alina hummed in the kitchen to an old 90s playlist. Then came the knock dot, not a polite knock, not a neighbor's tap. This was hard, sharp, impatient, the kind that made the walls vibrate. Alina froze mid-step, spatula in hand, her smile fading. "Expecting anyone?" she asked. I wasn't. I walked slowly to the front door, my stomach tightening with each step. When I peered through the peephole, my blood ran cold. There they were, my parents, Marcus and Lily, crammed onto the tiny porch like a portrait. Never wanted my mother was holding a casserole dish. Her face stretched into a smile so stiff it looked painful. My father stood tall and rigid, eyes hard, the way he used to look at me when he thought intimidation would keep me in line. Lily hid behind oversized sunglasses, arms crossed. Marcus scrolled lazily on his phone, like this was all an inconvenience. Didn't open the door. I cracked the window just enough to speak. "We're busy," I said flatly. My mother's voice came out, syrupy sweet. "Daniel, honey, we just came to talk. We brought food. We're family, after all." That word again, family. It dripped from her mouth like poison. I shook my head. No thanks. My father's voice cut through, sharp and commanding. "Enough of this nonsense. Come outside. We're not leaving until you face us." Behind me, Alina slipped her hand into mine. I felt her trembling not from fear, but from anger. She whispered, "They're not going to leave, are they?" "No," I said quietly. "They're not." Mother's smile faltered, slipping into the expression I knew too well, resentment, dressed as disappointment. She set the casserole down on the porch railing with a loud thud and crossed her arms. "This isn't you, Daniel. You're not this cruel. She's poisoning you against us." Lily pulled her sunglasses down just enough to glare at Alina. "Exactly, she's turned you against your own blood. That was it." I opened the window wider, locked eyes with Lily, and said, "Nobody poisoned me. You did that yourselves." The smile vanished from her face. Marcus finally looked up from his phone, scoffing. "Grow up, Daniel. You're throwing away your real family? Over what? Hurt feelings? Boo-hoo?" I held Elena's hand tighter and kept my voice steady. "You didn't want me at your weddings. You didn't want me at holidays. You made your choice a long time ago. Now I've made mine." The sweetness in my mother's voice cracked into rage. "You'll regret this," she hissed. Regret cutting us out when you have nobody left. I smiled, a real one this time. I already have everything I need, and then I closed the window. Not with a slam, not with anger, just quiet finality. For a heartbeat, there was silence outside. Then the banging began. Fists slamming against the door, voices shouting, the sound of wood groaning under pressure. Alina pulled me back toward the kitchen, her eyes wide. Should we call the police? I was about to answer when a loud crack echoed through the house. They weren't just yelling anymore. They were trying to break in. And in that moment, as my heart pounded like a drum in my chest, I knew the time for silence was over. This wasn't about rejection anymore. This was about survival. The pounding on the door stopped the moment sirens wailed in the distance. Through the window, I saw my mother snatch the casserole dish from the railing as if hiding it would erase. What they had done, my father barked at Marcus and Lily to act normal, and in seconds they were standing stiffly, pretending they were just neighbors out for a visit. But when the police cruiser rolled into the driveway, the act didn't hold. I stepped outside carefully, my palms open, making it clear I was the one who had called. The officers listened as my parents spun their story tears, streaming from my mother's face. My father insisting they had a right to see their son. Marcus sneering about me being dramatic. Lily muttering about brainwashing. Weren't impressed. They wrote it down for what it was. Harassment and attempted forced entry. That afternoon, I signed the papers for a restraining order. My hands didn't even shake. For the first time in years, I felt a line had finally been drawn in the sand. But my family wasn't done. The next few days were a blur of voicemails, texts, and messages. At first, they were angry. You'll regret this. No one will ever love you like we do. We're still your real family. I blocked the numbers, deleted the messages, and told myself silence was my weapon. Then the tone shifted. The messages turned pleading. My mother wrote long emails about how family sticks together. My father reminded me that blood couldn't be erased. Lily accused me of humiliating them. Marcus told me I was selfish. It wasn't remorse, it was desperation. They weren't asking to make peace. They were demanding control. When that didn't work, they escalated again. An envelope arrived in the mail. No return address, just my name written in block letters. Inside, a single line scrawled in my father's unmistakable handwriting. Family isn't done with you yet. I showed it to Alina. She shredded it immediately, her hands trembling with fury. They're bluffing, she said. They're testing you. Don't give them what they want. I wanted to believe her. I wanted to think a piece of paper signed by a judge would keep them out of our lives. But deep down, I knew better. My family had never accepted boundaries. To them, limits were just obstacles to climb over, and soon enough, they did more than just threaten. They walked into a courtroom, determined to twist the law itself into another weapon. The restraining order should have been the end of it. A clean cut, a legal wall between us and them. For a short while, the silence almost convinced me I was free. Alina and I settled into a rhythm slow mornings with coffee, late walks around the neighborhood, laughter-filling corners of the house. They used to echo with emptiness. But silence from my family was never peace. It was the quiet before another storm. The first crack came in the form of a phone call from my lawyer. His voice was clipped, professional, but there was an edge underneath. Your parents have filed a petition, he said. They're challenging the restraining order. I remember gripping the phone so tightly my knuckles turned white. On what grounds? I asked. They claim you're emotionally unstable, that your wife is manipulating you. They want the order overturned. It felt absurd, laughable even, but nothing about it was funny. They weren't just trying to break through my door anymore. They were trying to dismantle my life in front of a judge. The day of the hearing, I walked into the courtroom and saw them lined up like a tableau from my childhood. My mother dabbing fake tears with a tissue, my father glaring as if his authority should still carry weight, Lily whispering furiously into her lawyer's ear. Marcus slouched with boredom, scrolling his phone like the whole thing was beneath him. Their lawyer painted me as a fragile man, broken and confused, a son torn away from his loving family by a manipulative woman. Alina sat beside me, her hand gripping mine so tightly it hurt, and I watched them point their fingers at her like she was the villain in a play they had written long ago. But our lawyer had the truth. He laid out the police reports, the voicemails, the threats, even the attempt to break into my house. Each piece of evidence chipped away at the performance my family tried to sell. By the time he finished, their story collapsed under its own weight. The judge upheld the restraining order and expanded it, not just for me, but for Alina as well. The gavel came down with a sound that felt like freedom. For once, the law was on my side. My family left in a storm of muttered threats and angry stares, their act exposed, their narrative shattered. And for the first time, I thought maybe, just maybe, it was finally over. But a WASN single quotes, because soon after, Alina started getting sick. Headaches that clung for days. Fatigue that didn't match her spirit. Bruises she couldn't explain. At first, we laughed at off-stress, clumsiness, maybe just the toll of long work hours. But then the fainting began, and as I carried her, limp body through the sliding doors of the ER one Saturday morning, I realized the battle with my family hadn't ended in that courtroom. It had only shifted into something far darker. The hospital smelled of antiseptic and fear. I sat in that waiting room for hours, the fluorescent lights buzzing overhead, every second stretching into an eternity. When the doctor finally stepped out, his face was too careful, too neutral. That's when I knew something was wrong. "We found traces of heavy metals in your wife's system," he said gently. "Specifically, thallium." The word felt foreign on my tongue. Poison. He nodded once. "It's not something you'd encounter by accident. This kind of exposure is deliberate." Deliberate. The word stuck in my head like a siren. Alina, still pale and trembling in the hospital bed, gripped my hand as the reality set in. Someone had been poisoning her slowly, carefully, over time. The police were called that same day. Detectives walked through our front door with gloves and evidence bags, combing through everything we owned. They tested the water, the pipes, the soil around the house. Nothing. I stood in the kitchen, my stomach knotted as one of them ran, a swab along the edges of our cookware. Hours later, the lead investigator returned with a look I'll never forget. He set down a photograph of a ceramic casserole dish, the glaze chipped along the edges. Traces of thallium had been detected inside. The same dish my mother had carried to my doorstep, the one she had clutched in front of the police weeks earlier. Smiling with that brittle grin, the dish she had picked back up when the sirens came. I felt the blood drain from my face. My hands shook so badly I had to grip the counter to stay upright. All the pieces clicked together in an instant. Their threats, the visit, the dish they insisted on bringing as a peace offering. It hadn't been food. It had been a weapon. The detectives didn't waste time. Forensics tied the compound in Elena's blood to the same chemical structure found in the glaze. Search warrants were issued. My parents' home was turned upside down. Evidence was collected, documents, receipts, traces of the same compound, and then came the interrogations. My mother broke first. She sat in that stark room under the hum of fluorescent lights and tried to spin it as something else. We just wanted to weaken her, not kill her. Daniel needed to come home. He needed us. The words spilled out, delusional and terrifying. But beneath them was the truth. It had been planned. Not by her alone. My father knew. Lily knew. Marcus knew. They called it a plan to wake me up. The police called it conspiracy to commit murder. When the detectives told me everything, I couldn't breathe. Alina wept into my chest, whispering, "I knew they hated me. I just didn't think they'd go this far." And as the charges were filed and the mugshots hit the evening news, I realized my family had crossed a line they could never step back from. But this wasn't the end. It was only the beginning of a trial that would drag every dark secret into the light. I didn't sit in on the interrogations, but I didn't need to. The detectives showed me enough transcripts, recordings, their own grim expressions after. Ours locked in a room with my family. Reading their words felt like reopening every wound they had ever left on me. My mother was the first to crack. At the start, she played the victim. Her voice wavered, soft, pleading. "We just wanted to talk to him. He won't listen anymore. She, meaning Alina, she's poisoned him against us." When the detectives confronted her with the toxicology report and the casserole dish, the mask began to slip. "It wasn't supposed to be like this," she said finally. "We weren't trying to kill her, just weaken her, just enough so Daniel would realize he couldn't depend on her. He needed to come home. He needed us, needed them." As if years of exclusion, humiliation, and cruelty could be twisted into love. As if poisoning the only woman who had ever truly chosen me was an act of care. When pressed, she admitted she hadn't been alone. My father knew everything. He was the one who told her where to get the compound. Marcus had picked up supplies. Lily was the one who suggested using a dish it would look harmless, even generous. The transcripts read like a script from a nightmare. You're saying your children encouraged this? Mother, they understood. They knew he needed saving. Saving. That was the word she used to describe poisoning my wife. My father never broke down the way she did. He sat with his arms crossed, stone-faced, insisting he had every right. Intervene in my life. He's our son, he told them coldly. We don't need permission to bring him back where he belongs. Lily and Marcus tried to be clever, denying details, twisting stories, but under pressure, their arrogance betrayed them. Lily let slip that she knew how much thallium it would take to make someone sick without killing them, Marcus muttered. About family loyalty and how sometimes tough choices have to be made. Neither of them realized their words condemned them. What shocked me wasn't just their involvement, it was how casual they made it sound, as if plotting to destroy Elena's health was no different than planning a family dinner. They weren't sorry, they were indignant, insulted that anyone could see them as criminals. But the detectives saw it for what it was: conspiracy, intent, and an utter lack of remorse. When I read those transcripts, my hands shook so hard I could barely hold the pages. Elena pressed her head against my shoulder and whispered, "They'll never understand, will they? Not even now." And she was right, they wouldn't. To them, this wasn't madness, it was family duty. To everyone else, it was attempted murder. The case was building stronger than I ever expected. The evidence was airtight, their confessions damning, and soon all of it would spill into the public eye, into a courtroom where the town would see the truth of who they really were. The trial became the talk of the town before it even began. Headlines splashed across the local paper. Parents accused of poisoning son's wife, neighbors whispered in grocery aisles. Coworkers avoided eye contact. And people I hadn't spoken to in years sent cautious messages, some offering sympathy, others fishing for gossip. I had lived most of my life invisible to my family, but now their crimes made me more visible than I ever wanted. Walking into that courthouse felt like walking into another world. The ceilings stretched high, the air smelled of old wood and paper, and every bench was filled. Reporters sat pressed against the back wall, pens ready, cameras waiting. I took my seat beside Elena, her hand trembling in mine, and tried to steady my breathing. When the bailiff called for order, my parents entered, as if they were royalty stripped of their crowns. My mother wore black, her hair pulled back tight, her face pale with manufactured sorrow. My father carried himself like a wounded king, jaw clenched, eyes scanning the room with disdain. Lily kept her chin high, sunglasses perched on her head. Like armor, while Marcus slouched as though he were bored by the entire ordeal, their defense was as predictable as it was grotesque. Their lawyer painted me as weak, emotionally unstable, a son manipulated by a controlling wife who had severed him from his true family. My mother wept openly, insisting she had only ever wanted what was best. My father growled about betrayal and disrespect. Lily called Elena the outsider who destroyed everything, and Marcus smirked when the defense suggested Elena had exaggerated her illness. But the prosecution had more than tears and theatrics. They had evidence, hard, undeniable evidence. The toxicology reports showing thallium in Elena's system. The forensic analysis linking the poison to the glaze in the casserole dish. The emails, the texts, the voicemails dripping with threats. And then the transcripts from the interrogation room, each word like a nail in the coffin of their defense. When the recordings were played aloud, the courtroom went silent. My mother's voice trembling as she said, "We weren't trying to kill her, just weaken her." Lily admitting she knew the dosage that would make someone sick. Marcus muttering about family loyalty. My father declaring, "He's our son. We don't need permission." You could feel the air shift. Whatever sympathy they had hoped to gain evaporated. The jury leaned forward, their faces hardening with every word. Even the reporters stopped scribbling, their pens frozen midair. When it was my turn to testify, I stood and told the truth. About the childhood exclusion, the weddings I was never invited to, the night I left Marcus's house in silence, about the knock on the door, the casserole dish, the threats, the restraining order, and finally, about watching Elena collapse in the grocery store and learning the poison had been inside her all along. I didn't cry, I didn't shout, I just spoke, steady and clear. Because after years of being invisible, this was the one time my voice mattered. The deliberation didn't take long. Hours later, the jury returned. Guilty on conspiracy, attempted murder, and intent. The sentence, decades in prison. Long enough that freedom would be a distant memory by the time any of them saw daylight again, as the verdict was read. My mother broke down, sobbing into her hands. My father's face turned crimson with rage. Lily muttered curses under her breath, while Marcus finally lifted his eyes from his phone, shock flickering across his face as if he had only just realized this was real. I sat still, Elena's hand in mine, and felt something I had never associated with my family before: relief. But trials don't end neatly. Verdicts don't erase scars. And as we walked out of that courthouse, cameras flashing and reporters shouting, I knew the battle wasn't just about what they had done. It was about what I would do with the life they had tried so hard to take from me. The day the verdict came down, the courthouse emptied like a theater after a tragedy. Reporters scattered to file their stories. The jury slipped out through side doors, and my parents were led away in shackles. I didn't look at them, not when my mother cried out for me, not when my father muttered curses under his breath. That was the last time I would see them as free people. Walking into the sunlight with Elena's hand in mine, I felt the weight I'd carried my whole life loosen just enough to breathe again. But freedom doesn't erase the scars. For weeks, after I woke up in the middle of the night, drenched in sweat, hearing phantom knocks on the door, imagining that casserole dish sitting on my porch rail like a warning. Elena was still healing too. Her body needed time to recover, her strength slowly rebuilding. But every morning, she forced a smile, determined to show me that they hadn't won. She was alive, and that was our victory. The people who mattered most stepped in to fill the gaps my family left behind. Elena's parents welcomed me like a second son. No hesitation, no questions asked. My co-workers threw us a quiet celebration when we returned to the office, complete with a cake that read, Welcome to your real family. Neighbors left casseroles on our porch, not poisoned ones, but meals cooked with genuine care. It wasn't pity, it was solidarity. Piece by piece, life began to take shape again. I learned to laugh without checking over my shoulder, to celebrate small things like burning burgers at a backyard cookout or losing a board game on a Friday night. The emptiness my blood relatives had carved into me was slowly patched by people who chose me, who stayed even when it wasn't easy. One evening, months after the trial, Elena and I hosted a barbecue in our backyard. Nothing fancy, just a grill, some folding chairs, neighbors' kids chasing each other with water guns. At one point, I stepped back from the noise, a cold beer in hand, and watched Elena laughing with her best friend, our friends toasting each other, spilling drinks, and not caring. The yard alive with warmth and light. And it hit me. My family hadn't just missed my wedding. They had missed everything that came after. Every laugh, every moment, every ordinary, beautiful day. They'd locked themselves out of the life I had built, not because I pushed them away, but because they couldn't love me for who I was. For the first time, I didn't feel grief about it. I didn't feel anger. I felt free. Truly, completely free. But freedom comes with clarity. And as I stood there that night, fireflies flickering across the yard, Elena's head resting on my shoulder, I realized one truth above all else: family isn't defined by blood, it's defined by love, loyalty, and choice. That truth would carry me into the next chapter of my life. Chapter where I stopped looking back and started living forward. Looking back now, it's almost surreal how far things went. All I ever wanted was to be seen, to be valued, to belong at the table where my family sat. Instead, I was treated as a shadow, a reminder of everything they thought was wrong. They mocked me, excluded me, and when silence wasn't enough, they tried to break me apart piece by piece. But in the end, they failed, because what they never understood is that family isn't built on blood. It's built on choice, on love freely given, not forced through guilt or fear. I spent years chasing approval that was never coming, knocking on doors that were never going to open. The greatest act of survival I ever made was walking away. I see Elena's smile when I hear the laughter of friends who show up without obligation. When neighbors knock just to check in, I understand now what family truly means. They aren't tied to me by name or lineage, but by something stronger: loyalty, compassion, trust. They are the ones who stayed when others tried to tear me down. The people who once claimed to love me first are sitting in cells now, their lives consumed by bitterness and control, and I don't carry their shame anymore. That weight belongs to them, not me. I carry something else now: freedom. The freedom to choose who I let into my life. The freedom to protect what I've built. The freedom to define family on my own terms. And if there's one lesson I've learned, it's this: sometimes the greatest gift you can give yourself is the courage to close the door and never look back. Because family may be everything, but only if it's the right one. In the end, I learned that family is not defined by blood, but by the people who choose to stand with you when everything falls apart. I walked away from the ones who tried to destroy me and built a life with those who truly cared. That was my freedom, and I'll never give it up again. If this story kept you watching until the very end, don't forget to hit the like button, leave a comment with your thoughts, and subscribe to the channel so you won't miss more stories like this one.